Hi, everyone. Welcome to the panel. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. We're waiting for more people. In the meantime, maybe you can introduce yourself in the chat, say where you're from, and maybe an intention for why you're joining us today. My name is Pascal Tremblay, and I'm the co-founder of Nectara. It's a psychedelic wellness ecosystem to support people on a journey of preparation and integration of their psychedelic experiences. Calling in from Kaslo, also known as the ancestral lands of Tuna people and the Sinite people. And as is tradition at Nectara, we like to open our little events with a little ceremony. A way to indicate our ceremony is opening, I will light up this candle so that we can welcome in the ceremony of conversation together. So today we're joined by Mareesa Stertz and Cory Firth. And before I let them introduce themselves, I want to talk a little bit about the event. We're planning on having around 60 minutes. We'll do our best to do that because it's such a juicy topic. It might go a little bit over, but we'll do our best to stick to an hour. There might be some time at the end for questions, and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel after this. So what are we here to discuss? We're here to discuss storytelling and how it relates to the psychedelic story, both internally for your inner path and also externally in terms of social transformation and healing in the world. Peter Berger defines storytelling as a means for sharing and interpreting experiences. He says that human life is narratively rooted, that humans construct their lives and shape their world into homes in terms of these groundings and memories, which is really powerful stuff. So Mareesa, welcome. Would you like to give a brief introduction of who you are and why you're here today?
Sure. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for putting this all together. So my name is Mareesa Stertz. I'm a filmmaker, co-founder of Lucid News. I've been creating documentaries for quite some time around my own psychedelic journeys. And through that, have just witnessed the power of helping, unpack my own stuff by sharing it. And also through other teachers, witness the power of their stories and really stepped into guiding people to help unpack their stories. So I'm running storytelling workshops right now that have just toured the West Coast and are making their way to New York for Horizons.
Well, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And Cory, what's up in your world?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Nice to be with you, Mareesa. Nice to be with you, Pascal. My name's Cory Firth, and I'm dropping in from Kingston, Ontario, Canada, the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee people and the Anishinaabe Nation. My background is storytelling as well. So I'm the chief storyteller of the Nikean Foundation, and we're in the middle of launching a platform for psychedelic storytelling. My background in psychedelics, I was also the first executive director of the Canadian Psychedelic Association, or sorry, the Psychedelic Association of Canada, formerly the Canadian Psychedelic Association, when I was there. And then my background before that was in communications. And actually, I did a lot of storytelling with brands years ago, and now it's translated into more transformative storytelling along the similar lines to what Mareesa described in terms of how do we tell the stories of our transformational experiences. And we all know that describing the ineffable psychedelic experience is difficult. So the only thing we have is our story. And I'm very passionate about telling my own story. And my intention today is to bring that story to you, the story of kind of me and where I've come from, and the story of what we're up to with Nikean and our storytelling project, and to maybe hear some stories of yours if we have time, or some more of Pascal's story and Mareesa's story, as we all continue to unpack our stories. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, lovely to have you both. So our first exploration today is around the internal storytelling, the stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that we so often encounter in our psychedelic experiences where reality meets the more celestial lands of the psychedelic experience. Lena Waithe describes the story really well. She says that I'm writing my story so that others might see fragments of themselves. And throughout the realm of storytelling, we often hear about the hero's journey and how you are the hero. And the hero's journey, of course, is part of almost every movie. It's part of a lot of different books. how does the hero's journey, and maybe one of you can describe what the hero's journey is for those who are not aware of it, and how does that relate to psychedelic experiences?
I wanted to have Cory take a stab at that because he's heard my take, so I'm curious to hear his.
I actually, like, in terms of the hero's journey specifically, is for me, it's not the framework that I use for when we talk about psychedelics. It's I think that there are many ways to tell stories, and we're all unique storytellers, innate storytellers, and it's been around for a long time. And we're going to get into that, I think. But the seeker's journey is a little bit, it's probably similar, but when we bring in the framing of psychedelics, there's a seeking aspect to it that adds a different element than just the hero's journey. So while I think that's a really great framework, and I know, Mareesa, you'll talk about that because I think that's a big part of your work. I really like that as a framework. But what we've done at the Nikean Foundation, which has been really cool to test out with 100 or so stories over the last couple of months, is the idea of the psychedelic seeker's journey, where you start out as curious about something, looking to transform something. And that's in that same mindset of the same framework of the hero's journey, which starts out in that sort of ordered area where something's going on. There's something you're troubled by, something you're looking to overcome, or something you're just plain curious about. And then you move into the kind of unknown, and that's where you just start to explore things. And that's when you discover psychedelics, and psychedelics then become this tool or gateway to understand that curiosity that you had. And then you come back up, and then it circles back around for us in the framework that we're using to be able to bring that story to life. And in the way that Dr. Pamela Kriskow frames it is take the ordinary insights that you gain from the psychedelic experience and make them ordinary. And the way that I like to do that is through telling story. And for me, just the last element of it for me is the actual telling of it. That's what I come back to is the idea around dialogue. And the word dialogue, it comes from the root word, the two root words, dia, which means moving towards, and logos, which means meaning. So if we can enter into dialogue throughout telling the story, and by telling it to others and having input back and forth and listening to other stories, you move towards meaning. So for me, it's really powerful, because the one troubling experience with psychedelics is that it's very hard to describe when you're out of it. And the more we tell our stories and the more we build on our stories, the more we do what I think Mareesa will get into, and the work that she does, is we start to understand the narratives better and the way the story evolves. And so that's my view on the journey of itself, called the hero's journey, called the seeker's journey, whatever you want. I think there's many ways to do it, and that's the way I like to frame it up.
Beautiful. Thank you, Cory. Mareesa, do you want to add to the psychedelic seeker's journey, and how does that compare to the typical traditional hero's journey that you know so well?
I think I'll start with the hero's journey just because I think it's really an interesting framework to reference when we're lost on our path of understanding ourselves. So Joseph Campbell, famous scholar, professor, writer, was known for taking stock of the world's myths, stories, plays, great works of literature, pop culture, whatever, every kind of story there was. And he found the formula, which he calls the hero's journey, which incidentally, I actually have on my screen. Would it be okay to share it real quick? Just
Yeah, for sure.
for
Are you
people
able to do
tuning
that?
in? Yeah, I think so. Let's see. Yeah. So, and why it's so powerful to bring up right now is it's also a formula that kind of helps navigate every struggle I've experienced in my life. And so this is the reason why I think this is such a powerful tool is once we start applying it to our own inner struggle of, wow, I'm depressed. I have no way of making sense of it. You can actually take it and map it on top. And I think the seeker's journey very much works like that. There's a bunch of different journeys where they all map, but the hero's journey was the genesis of putting it into a formula. And the parts that I think are relevant is we live in this known world, and we're adapted it a little bit myself, but the idea is we're living in some programs and there's a call to adventure, to step out of our normal programming, to get out of our normal known world and to challenge it. And we start to transform, and we experience a series of challenges and temptations as we challenge those original programs, that societal, religious, cultural, familial conditioning. And as we challenge those programs, it leads us into an abyss, which is depression, hardship, breakdown, illnesses, all kinds of normal things that, the medical world has said, oh, that's a disease, or you have a disability and there's no way to get through it. When I want to argue, in fact, in the hero's journey and all the world's stories argues that this is a natural part of human transformation, and that actually the abyss is a very important part of, the way I like to frame it is overcoming those old programs of the known world that didn't serve, and recreating your own programs from your own knowing, from a centered place, to create the world you want to see in a way that makes sense for you. And so then we transform through it. We integrate it or atone for whatever we weren't doing so great in the first place. And then we bring it back into our known world where it's no longer such a struggle. So that's my take on the hero journey. I've actually modified a version of calling it the human's journey, around just programming and revising our programs. I think I spent a lot of my years in healing from trauma or finding my center and feeling very lost in the process, and feeling like I really wanted a map that could help me navigate it. When I found this, I was like, oh my God, there's a map. Does everybody know this? That this actually maps onto our personal struggles? The one caveat I would say is that if you are in the abyss and you haven't made it through this cycle ever, this doesn't make sense. You might look at it and you'll be like, nah, that doesn't work for me, because that was the case when I first looked at it when I was 22. I was like, this doesn't make any sense at all. And it took me going through it a few times to go, oh, that actually maps on every time.
Beautiful. So then the power of understanding the current story and your past story, is that a key element then of moving forward? Is really like spending time in contemplation or spending time writing? Like, how can someone who's never worked with storytelling recognize, their story, and then clarifying exactly where they're at in that journey? Like, what would you recommend for that? Like, how can someone start with storytelling?
Funny you should ask, because I run a course with it.
Oh.
I don't know if I'm literally teaching people just how to identify the elements of their own life and how they map onto this typical story structure. But for people, I think an easy start would be to listen to a handful of podcasts that we can probably link to at the end. I have some recommendations on how our own journeys connect to the hero's journey. And for me, when I run people through it, I'm like, let's identify the biggest struggle you've had in your life right now, that you're struggling with right now, and also the ones you've grappled with throughout your life. What are the common elements? And can you start to track back over your life? Like, we create timelines, and we start to identify difference in your life where you were recreating that same struggle, and then actually mapping it all the way back to when it first started. And then from that place, you start to recognize the pattern that is coming up, and you can start calling it a program. And it depersonalizes the process of being like, oh, I have this heavy thing that I feel so broken about. It's not you, it's rather you received a program that doesn't serve you. And by just noticing that there's a pattern and that everyone else has similar patterns, it helps shift your perspective and your relation to your struggle in a way that I think enables you to recognize how it maps on the journey and how you can see your way through.
One of my teachers, like at some point during my hero's journey, shared like one of the elements of the cycle of change. It's like intention, action, those type of things. And the last one in the cycle was support. So I feel like the hero's journey, I think, should be maybe reframed as something more like community journey, maybe, because we're always like writing our own story with it, with other people walking it with us. And how do we support ourselves with that? How can we use story work as preparation, or as fuel that drives our mission instead of sabotaging it? How do we reframe the abyss, and how do we reframe kind of the challenges we've had into like more empowering narratives for ourselves? Like, what are ways that we can do that?
You want to go, Cory? I just talked a lot.
Sure. Yeah. For me, it kind of just goes back to the other question too, is, if you can't take Mareesa's course, which I've gone through the first part of it, it's great, but if your schedule doesn't align or whatever, one other tool is internal family systems, which is parts work. And that's a really great place to start when you can't grab onto every element of the story, and you just have to navigate some of those internal narratives. And I think the thing that I'm realizing in my own journey is that there's not one narrator. There are many different narrators, and they're all maybe telling the same story. I'm still trying to figure that out, but at least they're all playing a role. And it's fun I was just exploring some more today with my mom, actually, in the understanding of a part of me that I was wrestling with, and the story that that part of me had created since a very young age, actually around the age of 8, to the point where a lot of my behavior and a lot of the trajectory of my life was related to this element of the story, this part of me that was created. And what I've realized is that it seems like we're maybe part of what I might call the human conditioning crisis right now. We're all kind of understanding that we're in a bit of an identity clash with ourselves, and that we're realizing, like what Mareesa was talking about a little bit, which is like this idea that the story was created for us already without our intention. And now that we're older and we're understanding more of it, I think what's happening now, we're becoming more aware and becoming more awake to these things. Then now we can see those little parts and sit with them a little bit and not pick them apart as bad. Because for me, this part of me that I was describing before, which we can dive into, of course, but I don't want to spend all time talking about my trauma, it's very important to the bigger part of the story, and it's not a bad thing. And so there's real use for that part of the story and how it can then fuel what you said was mission. I might just say purpose or intention with life. And you can give that part a positive action to take in the story and allow it to create something new. Yeah, I guess internal family systems would be something I would look into as part of both of those questions.
Yeah, thanks, Cory. And how does the process of storytelling relate to preparing for a psychedelic experience? A lot of people have intentions and they have like a journaling practice, or maybe they've never tried psychedelics before. How do you leverage storytelling for embarking on this potentially transformative experience of a psychedelic journey? How would you leverage that tool? And is it as simple as writing your previous story and maybe reimagining a new story you'd like to create? Like what are ideas for that around psychedelic preparation?
I can take a stab at that. Early on my path of working with psychedelics, I would come in and be this just like bundle of this doesn't work and this doesn't work and this doesn't work and this doesn't work, and then there's not enough money and relationship and community and blah blah blah. Like I had all these complaints and I didn't really know what part to tackle, and I was just a ball of stress and anxiety and things. And what I think is so cool about using story work as a preparation tool is the idea of we start to parse out the different threads, similar to what IFS does in a really cool way. It's just using it through a narrative lens. The idea is, all right, what is my struggle around, say, abundance and scarcity? Let's pull that thread out. Let's find all the stories, how it's showing up in my life now, how it's been showing up in the past, and what were the first experiences around money or around receiving affection, even around receiving toys that you wanted as a kid, whatever it is, and starting to notice the patterns that are there and really what I found is by familiarizing yourself with all these aspects of your history when you are sober ahead of your journey, what you're doing is you're priming yourself. You're getting all the pieces on the table, all the ingredients that make you on the table, all your stories around them and the meaning you've made, so that when you go into the journey, your whole system is like, all right, I just swam in the soup of all my stories here. You're primed to focus on that one thing and actually let your unconscious mind dive deep down, your subconscious dive deep down to unpack whatever you might not have access to with your normal perspective.
Yeah, I wouldn't change anything there, just maybe add to it, which just to say that it depends on, I think it depends on if it's your first psychedelic experience to if it's your third or fourth or fifth, because there's so much in there that can be overwhelming not just swimming in your stories, like Mareesa says, not, but also trying to grab onto the experience itself. That can be difficult if it's your first experience, just for anyone listening. But yeah, it's become a massive tool for ongoing preparation and using conscious stream of writing and this part stuff and some of these frameworks. It's so nice to try to put this experience into a little bit of a container to understand a little better.
And there's also like the idea of rewriting the stories inside our nervous system, right? So when my men's group got together last week, we always have a very strong medicine container that we hold each other with somatic therapy. And there's a lot of parts of role playing in that where you can rewire old stories from your childhood by going into your nervous system and reframing the story around that. Maybe you were in hell as a child, maybe your dad was neglecting you, maybe your mom was really absent or like really dysregulated. There's a way using medicine to get into that space, that energy, that story of mom wasn't loving me, and having someone play the role of mother or father and getting into that space, and then someone else, like a neutral party, coming in and holding someone and rewiring that story. And I found that to be very powerful, is that our stories are embedded in our nervous system. Could you share around that relationship between stories internally and our nervous system, and how can storytelling help us like get deeper into those stories and rewire them?
The cool thing for me, if I can take this one to start, Mareesa, is stories are uniquely human. It's such a unique part of us to just be telling ourselves these stories, having this experience of being conditioned around a story of who we are, what our identity is, and why we're here, and why our behaviors are these ways. But I've been watching these different shows on Disney with my daughter. She doesn't understand anything really all that much just yet because she's only 16 months old. But we're watching these ones on the lions and just seeing how they don't have that. They're there and they're hunting and they're gathering and they're protecting. They're not going, oh, I wonder if I go over this way and if mama cub or mama lion will get upset with me. And there's none of that in there. They're just acting. But us, for humans, we're instinctually wired by story. And so to rewire it, like you're describing, Pascal, is super important. I think as part of what I was describing as this human conditioning crisis, to unpack that stuff, revisit it all, like Mareesa, you were describing, and how you go back over it before you go into a journey. And then when you get into the integration, which might be what happens with what you were describing, Pascal, in the men's group, is to be able to just lay it all out there without as much judgment towards it, if you have the right container for that and the right people. And I think the other element of all this is that it's really important to stop telling your own story to yourself. I think we'll probably get there, but it's so important to tell your story to somebody else. That's why I bring in that word dialogue, because it moves towards meaning, not just for the other person who's listening to it, but for you. You get to add more meaning to the story for yourself to help you understand it better. It was a real throw up of ideas there, but I hope that came through clear.
It's all good. Perfect.
Yeah. To build up what you were saying earlier, this kind of deeper work is not for people on their first journey, unless you're like a well-seasoned meditation person and suddenly you find yourself able to get into the zone. Awesome. If you're not, but it usually takes some time, a good handful of journeys, to be able to do this on your own, or even better if you have a guide to work with you. But the idea of swimming in the soup of your stories beforehand, and then even thinking beforehand, what is the soup that I want to create instead? What is the program or story I want to live my life according to moving forward? There's a handful of ways to play with that, including, actually, Joe Dispenza is awesome, has amazing meditations to get yourself into, Pascal, as you're mentioning, this somatic sense of what is you at your highest self, and can you allow yourself to create, and just to run with the thread of scarcity and abundance. If that's the soup you've been swimming in your whole life and you want to rewire that in a journey, why don't you record a meditation or record your voice narrating to yourself, what does it look like to be in full abundance? What I've done personally is I've journaled. All right, I am so grateful for the amazing community I've helped co-found in Costa Rica, where we live on the land, and all the traveling I'm doing back and forth between San Francisco, and like all the specific things, the kind of work I'm doing, how I'm spending my days, how much play there is. And I'm getting really concrete about that. I write it all out and then I record it. And then I'll take that in a journey and listen to it when I'm all opened up. So I am literally reprogramming myself. Sometimes I put a cool musical track underneath it that gets me jazzed as well. And then this is something that I do on a regular basis in my morning meditation too. I'll just, without the medicine, I'll listen to this recording because I'm reprogramming and I'm getting my body into a state of excitement and feeling jazzed and like, okay, yeah, this is what it feels like in all those ways. And then I also recommend not getting attached to the specifics that you've written, but really more mapping out what it feels like in your body.
Yeah, lovely. I think of storytelling a bit like a rubber band. It's like the psychedelic experience is like you take the rubber band and you have this experience and it stretches you to a whole new level. And then like over time, it becomes the new normal. And with storytelling, I love what you bring that up because I used to do a lot of brand work for strategy work for companies and people as well. And one of my favorite questions I would ask them is, imagine we're having coffee 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. We're sitting down and like, I'm asking you like, what has gone so well? And can you describe to me how it's been and what it feels like? And I like to have them go into like super deep details on what this vision state is, like around like not just the visuals, but like how it feels like, how does it sound? What does it smell like to be in that space? What are you wearing? What are you seeing around you? And that creates this whole new paradigm of what's possible. And then you can fully step into it over time. But it's a beautiful exercise. I love that you do that. That's very powerful rewiring of the story. And so as we're bridging into more of the external side of storytelling, we talked about community a little bit and support. How can we, of course, we want to clarify our story first, but how can we tell our story in a compelling and exciting way so that we can enlist others in better understanding us and support our mission in life? How do we do that? Storytelling is not natural for everyone. It can be challenging sometimes. We might feel like we're not good enough to do it. There's a certain kind of resistance to it that some people may have. Like, how do you tell your story in a way that's compelling and will bring people into the house of you?
Can I just start real quick with that? I just have one thing, Pascal. I disagree. We're all good storytellers. It's the
This is what
story
I
we
was gonna
tell
say.
Thank
ourselves.
you.
Yeah, the story we tell ourselves about our storytelling abilities is the thing that gets in the way. And
Yes,
then now
thank you.
over to Mareesa, because I know you have a really great framework that you're teaching people about. So I'd love to hear more about that.
I was just going to start with the same thing is that we're all actually super talented storytellers because and I also wanted to anchor this into how this all starts. It's like from a child, as a baby, you're receiving the stories of your parents, whatever ideas they had around scarcity and abundance, and you're then recreating that, and then you are verbally internalizing how you relate to that story, and your relationship to it becomes so ingrained because you've been like you've grown up in it that it is part of you, and we're not usually aware of it. This is why psychedelics are so powerful to help us better understand it. Basically zooming out and getting to witness the life you have in front of you is a recreation of the stories that you've been telling yourself that stem from your experiences in childhood is huge. And so first empowering people with the tool that they are actually really powerful stories, that storytellers, that they haven't yet necessarily learned how to articulate it to others. Those are two different pieces, but for saying
Mhm.
we all are all really powerful. And I think it's the most powerful tool we have. And most of us are very unconscious of the fact that we are powerfully recreating everything we exist in with our inner voice and the narrative we have by ourselves. So that's the first part. I just wanted to put that down and say uh, there's a lot of tools to becoming an effective communicator of your story with others, and a lot of reasons that it's really valuable. One, I think that so much pain exists because there's so much shame around it. And when we start to share our stories vulnerably, that begins to dissipate. And everyone else goes, "Oh, I see myself in your story. Wow, I also suffer like that. I thought I was so alone, but I see it in yours." And when you get a room of people doing this, suddenly everybody's cracked open and feeling a lot less alone. The reasons why, one of the things that I think make a really effective storyteller is the tool of vulnerability, the tool of also discernment, and knowing which parts of your story are connected and which parts are not. So being an editor and pulling out what doesn't serve, mapping it onto like your traditional story arc and figuring out how to build suspense. There's like tools like that, and practice, lots of practice. So I think this is the things that help us effectively communicate it.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, that piece around shared humanity, to me, I always like to share around like how that's, to me, the most healing part of the psychedelic experience is like sharing it with others. I really love that space of vulnerability and no judgment, and just being seen and heard without judgment. I find that so powerful. And yeah, it's that storytelling piece is like a huge part of the experience for me personally. Lisa Cron has a beautiful quote on story and how it's affected society. She says that story, as it turns out, was crucial to our evolution, more so than opposable thumbs let us hang on, and story told us what to hang on to. So I quite love that. This is a big topic, of course. Like there's been millions of years of story in the world, but what is the role of storytelling in the fabric of culture and society? Like just on a really high level, storytelling and how it's shaped the world. It's an essential piece, isn't it?
Yeah. May I?
Please.
Yeah, storytelling is, you guys can all tell how passionate Mareesa and I are about storytelling. I could sit here all day and flow with you guys. But storytelling it's an ageless art form that's really been documenting civilization's next steps since the beginning of time. It's literally almost everything we've built on has been through the passing of stories, especially when we think about the traditional storytelling practice of indigenous tribes, and how part of their initiation rituals when their children are young and they bring them up into a higher level of responsibility within the tribe or within the culture. Part of the practices in some tribes is to have the children tell the stories about what the tribe represents and what their missions are and what their purpose is and what they do. And that's to help them, one, understand if that child is ready for that experience, but also to help them assimilate to their story and to their culture and to their community. And so it's been around for so long, and it's innate in us, it's wired in us, much a drug. I would say storytelling is a drug. And when we come back around to it, as with psychedelics, it is a medicine in itself, and it's a big part of the medicine journey with psychedelics. Storytelling can be very mind manifesting, but it can also be very manipulative. It can be good and it can be bad. And we've seen it used in many forms personally, as we've been conditioned around our own individual stories through our epigenetics and our environment and our nurturing. But we've also seen it with government and politicians and schools and media in the over vilification of psychedelics specifically, if we can bring it around to that. We've seen that as a major cultural experience as humans, where storytelling played a huge role, where we were told that through story, that if you do drugs, your brain will fry up like an egg and you'll fall out a window or maybe jump, which
It'll make you go crazy.
It's crazy how many times I've heard that story. That specific story about frying my brains and jumping out a window.
That's what I saw in the middle of my G.I. Joe and He-Man cartoons when I was a kid. It was like the dare ads of the egg. And it was like, I was like, I am never doing drugs. This is terrible. And then 15, 20 years after, whenever I would hear the word drug or meet people who were doing it, I was like, you're going crazy. You're going stupid. And that was because of one single story that I heard.
That's crazy. And if I could tell you a story, one story to add to that is the first time I heard about any drug was marijuana. I was ushered into our library at our school, at elementary school. They had pushed all the bookshelves aside, and there were four big burly cops standing over top of a 4x6 masking tape rectangle on the ground that they had taped up. And we all had to sit around it. And they told us that if you do marijuana, you will end up here for the rest of your life. And the whole idea was that marijuana is a gateway drug. And hell yeah, it is. And it's a really great gateway drug to many other cool experiences. Obviously good or bad, like I said, but storytelling is also a gateway drug. And I think it's such an interesting gateway into who you are. It's a gateway into who your community is. So having story represent all these different parts of you and what you do. You talk about mission, you talk about work and purpose and the different things that we do. Story is a gateway to helping others understand what it is you're trying to do and where you come from. And the vulnerability piece is like the anchor. If I can just come back to what Mareesa was dropping there before, it's really the anchor to it all for me, is just being open to telling it, which takes a lot of time because we're told by people like Pascal that we're not good storytellers.
I was just testing you both to see if you would pick up on that.
I'm just kidding.
All good. So the psychedelic space is a unique vehicle for stories because obviously you go in the ether or higher realms or whatever, you get pushed around by ayahuasca for 12 hours. You'll come back with some really innovative, cutting edge visions of the future and of yourself. And then you bring that back into the world. So as a vehicle for change, like the psychedelic storytelling is very powerful. In terms of the psychedelic space itself, like how would you say that story written by the psychedelic space has changed over the last 10, 15, 30 years, or even the last 2 or 3 years? Things are moving so quickly. How would you relate that societal shift in psychedelics and the stories we've been telling to the space?
Depends on who you're talking to.
I've been just blabbing, so you go ahead.
Yeah, no, it definitely depends on who you're talking to. There's so many different perspectives on what's happening right now.
What is yours?
What is mine? I also grew up with the same DARE program and the same drugs are bad. I was in a Nancy Reagan Just Say No t-shirt in a parade one year with my whole schoolmates waving in the world not to do drugs. And then I was encountering it at a young age. And I remember writing a report on why marijuana should not be illegal at 15 years old. I still have it lying around somewhere. The artwork is, and so there was this, in my own perspective, this was just so unfair and it made no sense that everything was illegal, especially as my own experiences helped me understand so much more. The community, I really started to get personally involved with people in the community working with psychedelics just 8 or so years ago. Yeah. My experience with everyone else is that they never thought we would be moving in the direction we're moving this fast. Everyone was like, no, there's no way. I personally thought there was, and I was just pushing for it. I was creating documentaries, normalizing it, and just being like, hey guys, let's just talk about this. And I have a series on Gaia TV called The Healing Powers of Psychedelics and Other Mindful Practices, where it's very much like Anthony Bourdaining this, because I saw in 2017 a world that was going to want to normalize and talk about this. But when I talk to some of my friends who are 60 plus years old, they're like, we never thought this was going to happen. We constantly thought that the psychedelics were the most subversive thing we can do, and that there was no way they were ever going to actually get integrated into mainstream medical and society. This is, and as fast as it has happened. So a lot of them are just like, whoa, this is intense. And the corporatization that's happening in a way that's a little scary and alarming, and falling into a paradigm that is very opposing to the ethics that psychedelics illuminate within us. So people are feeling a little scared about it. And at the same time, everybody's getting really involved that I know, and helping create frameworks to safeguard it from falling into the old pitfalls of exploitive capitalism. Working really hard, fingers crossed.
Yeah. I like to use an analogy for psychedelics that they're like psychedelics an immune response system from planet Earth. And that like our struggles, our abyss, as you said in the hero's journey, has directly led to the emergence of psychedelics in the world. So I feel like a lot of what's been happening has been just a result of the story we've been telling ourselves as a global society around like our pain and our struggles, and the emergence could be an organic development of all that. So that's pretty inspiring and exciting.
I love that. And I've met indigenous who for a long time it wasn't right for the white man to be having ayahuasca. And then they said in the last few years, the medicines have told them to bring it out and to share it with the world, because this is what the world needs to wake up. I like that immune response, earth immune response activated.
Yeah, and just for those who maybe have not experienced psychedelics, like definitely be careful and like practice harm reduction practices and get prepared and do your work. And it's not something to take lightly in your bathroom and just like having a big trip there, although that could also be beneficial, but just be careful, just as a disclaimer. And so as we're walking this journey together as a global society, and people are healing, some people are walking the hero's journey, and we're all so many different places where we're at in our story. How do we write a better future together? What does that look like? It's a big question. Like, how do you solve all the world problems in less than 2 minutes?
I have some ideas. So, Cory, you want to go?
Can you repeat the question?
Writing a better future together, what does that look like? It might be too vague and maybe too like,
I got a thing for you
on this one.
The first thing that I want to say is just tell your story. Like, just do this. Just it doesn't have to be on a webinar that's planned by a community that has you jump on a Zoom. Just go to the library. The library is a great place to go. There are tons of storytelling events at libraries that we forget about. The library, we need to hold on to those places. Those places should not become museums. So get in community and share. I think that would be my only suggestion on that, other than visit Nikean.org and tell your psychedelic story.
Yeah, that's yeah, go ahead, Mareesa.
I was just going to say that I feel like we're really suffering a crisis of imagination and a lack of recognizing how powerful we are as creators, and the power we are wielding with our own stories. And so when a crisis of imagination, as in, oh, I could just sit there and lose myself in this thing here and not actively be a creator of my life, because we're so often sucked into just trying to get by day, we're not zooming out to become an architect and be strategic. And so I think slowing things down a little bit and recognizing the power, like observing your own internal stories that you're telling yourself, and spending time trying to step really out of those and create the world, like imagine and create a vision of the world you would like to see for yourself. And as we just allow ourselves to think outside of our own box of what we think is possible, what is the most extraordinary version of you doing? How are you interacting with the world around you? How is the world a reflection of you living your highest joy? And as we start to orient with that as a possibility, because this is what I've done in my own work, and as I've held really extraordinary possibilities for myself at times when I felt like they were completely impossible, and then as time has progressed, stepped into them more and gone, wow, I'm creating. This is amazing. I'm putting more faith into my vision. And I think and as we do that, and as we share that we're doing that through our storytelling, we're empowering each other. And I think holding a vision where we see a world that is in balance, that we see a world where everyone is doing their own work and coming from their center, rather from a place of scarcity or trying to save the world. And as we blueprint ourselves living according to our visions, and we share that, I think that collects some speed and becomes contagious. And so in that way, our shared vision of a world that's balanced, that is sustainable, that is much more loving, becomes more and more real, and we can create it, but we have to hold it in the first place. And there's all those steps I just listed to get us there.
Yeah, you talked that's beautifully said. I always say sci-fi movies need to be way more positive and way more imaginative of what's possible. Who's tired of dystopian like sci-fi movies? I'm tired of stuff like around movies that are humans didn't figure it out. and it's a really dark world. I want to see more movies where it's a beautiful vision. It's a beautiful version of the future that we can create. So it really does start with sharing that your story. And as I'm going to ask Cory around this, if anyone has any questions, we do have a bit of time for questions. If anyone has questions around storytelling or Mareesa's work or Cory's work at Nikean, would love to have them in the chat. So Cory, how can people get involved in this movement of sharing your story? What are ways that people can engage with that?
Yeah. I want to add to the last question there is that this whole idea where we're at with, I guess it's a culmination of a multiple of the questions. I had them here. I just looked over and I was thinking about them again and what we said and listening to Mareesa talk there. And we're at this place right now where, at least in Canada, we have to prove that psychedelics work, right? We put all this work in to do all these research studies, and yet still we're still having to put in the work. And so data seems to be moving science. And the common quote is that data moves science and story moves culture. And I think we've gotten to a really great place with data and science. And everything I'm about to say is not to poo any of that, but we need the stories now. And the reason that we have created the Psychedelic Storytelling Project at Nikean.org, Nikean.org, you can link it, I'll put it in the chat, or it's a simple one to find in Google, is because we believe that if you transform out loud, then you prevent others from suffering in silence. And so we really strongly believe that if we tell our tales of transformation through psychedelics, that it opens a window and opens up an opportunity for someone who is seeking that experience to have the permission or inspiration to go and take a step and have a journey for themselves. And so I think the question was where, but that's also why we're doing it. And it's a philanthropic effort. We're a charity, a foundation. So everything that we do with this project, it's all about education and knowledge mobilization. So taking education from out of the lab and out of the lecture hall and into the real world experience where we can help each other move towards meaning through the exchange of these stories and really hit on not just our own emotions with our own stories, but those of others that were in a similar place before we had our transformational experiences. So I'm waiting for anyone who's willing to share a story. And I've heard from Pascal and Mareesa, they both shared. So if you feel so, we're launching our platform October 14th, soft launch, and then it'll slowly build out from there. But if you'd like to be a part of that, we're here and we'd love to hear your story.
And I'm so excited about what you're doing there because I really believe that storytelling is the tip of the spear in terms of like changing policy, changing the cultural framework that psychedelics have been in since the frying eggs of Dare and way before that as well. So I feel like the storytelling brings people into the space of, oh, I see myself in you. It's a mirror. And then it transcends like political biases and cultural and all those type of things that get in the way of like just being human again. And like the storytelling, of course, is a very connective tissue between humans since forever. I love what you're doing. And yeah, if you haven't shared your story with Cory and the team there, like highly recommended.
Well, there's one other plug or benefit to all this, I think. Sorry to interrupt, Pascal, but okay. I just found out that we might actually have an opportunity to share some of our stories with Health Canada as they're building sort of a task force, so it seems, like they did with marijuana here in Canada, to investigate psilocybin and other psychedelics. And so what we're going to do is try to put together a package of stories to give to them. And we're hoping to include physicians and therapists and guides and individuals that have had their own experiences. So it's not just like this pithy, rolling off the tongue, maybe marketing babble that I'm saying about how much I believe in story and how I believe in this project. We actually now can see that we'll be able to have an impact with this, because I think if there's anyone on that task force that doesn't believe that psilocybin can have the impact that it has, because they don't believe in the research yet, or they think enough, when they see stories from people that have had those experiences, that can really help to move the needle. And we're hoping to put that together. So you can be a part of that.
And that's what it's all about, right? It's like people living healthier, better lives. That's what it's all about in the end. And who doesn't want that, right? Yeah. Mareesa, What are you up to in the world, and how can people learn with you, walk the journey with you?
I just want to say, Cory, I'm so excited about what you're doing. Yay, yay, yay. Thank you for,
Ditto.
yeah. And Pascal, you too. What am I doing in the world? We mentioned I'm teaching storytelling workshops, which I'm actually doing on Nectara. We're going to do a free 1 hour and a half class next month in a couple of weeks. So mark your calendars. That'll be, I think, on the 25th of October, hopefully. And then middle November, we'll be offering a 6-part workshop as well. So that is one thing. I'm also currently about to be in production on a documentary about iboga and about rewriting our programs and our stories. And I'll be sharing my own personal story and going into a retreat in Costa Rica and doing 2 big flood doses of iboga. So currently raising funds for that. What's the other project? Oh, and I'm writing a play about my own stories with trauma. And I'm bringing a big project to Burning Man in a couple of years. That's also about helping people understand their own story and the Sphinxes from the never-ending story. So these, I've got my hands in a lot of pots, and they have to rotate, and some take the front burners and some take the back burners. But the storytelling and this iboga documentary are the 2 nearest up right now, and yeah, really excited to be working on them.
Wow.
I guess you can find out about more about the storytelling. I'll put the website in here, but it's theseeingmachine.com/storytelling. And I'm sure there'll be information available on Nectara soon as well.
Yeah. Thanks for doing so much beautiful story work. And I really look forward to your Burning Man. What's it called? A machine, an installation, an experience. It seems like a lot of different cool stuff together. And The Never Ending Story, of course, is one of the best movies ever. So I really look forward to experiencing that.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's 2 gigantic sphinxes that will shoot laser beams and help thaw out your limiting beliefs that are holding you back in life.
Yes to lasers and more Sphinx. Yes. So thank you so much for being here. We're looking forward to meeting again. And I'll close the candle to close the ceremony. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And I hope you all stay well and be well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to see y'all.